Joining us on the How Did You podcast today is Rav. Rav is an award-winning producer, camera operator, and editor. He currently delivers news and current affairs programming. How are you doing today, Rav?
I'm very well, thanks. What the listeners don't know is that this is the second take of this, and it's been edited because you completely fluffed up the intro. But that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
It's really going to be like that, isn't it? Okay. So, how was it decided that you would become a video journalist in 1994? Was it something that you'd always planned in life, or was
No.
it something that just happened spontaneously?
No, absolutely not. No, I was interested in electronic engineering, and I was making a right old mess of my university degree. And I did a year of it, and I thought I can't do another year of this because you'd get like old geezers coming in with very large sideburns and going, and in a few years you could be like me, or you could work at BT, and who the hell wants to do that? So I kind of drifted towards the student union newspaper at Greenwich University. It was called the Saki Cut, and I ended up writing. It was film reviews and things like that for it, and I got the bug for writing there. And I knew there was a problem when I actually went to university and spent the whole day in the student union office writing instead of going to lectures. It was never going to work out well. And then, all right, so I was interested in electronic engineering. After that year, I thought, right, I need to go and get a job because this is not working out for me. And I was looking around, didn't find anything. I went on the dole for must have been about 2 months or so. It's one of these usual stories. I went to a barbecue, and at that barbecue was someone who was involved in starting a TV station, and she was the head of HR. And she said, "Oh, why don't you come around? You like electronics and all that sort of stuff, and why don't you come around and have a look, see what we're doing? We're putting cables on the floor, and it's all new technology, and it's fantastic." The place was called Channel One Television, and it's set up in London as a 24-hour news station, and it was interesting, So it was actually beginning of '94 that I went there as just to have a look, and within a few weeks, I was so desperate to work there. I would turn up early and leave late, and I would be doing the most mundane jobs, franking the mail and taking out the rubbish, and there were crazy things, like they moved into the old Channel 4 building on Charlotte Street, and with that purchase came a warehouse in Docklands, and they sent me to the warehouse to clear it out. And in there, I was telling someone about this the other day, and they couldn't believe it. In there were 30,000 videotapes. Now they were called M2 tapes, the old sort of broadcast tapes. And my job was to wipe these tapes through a big degausser, and then prepare them for shipping off to Bulgaria. And so I just put these tapes through, and then suddenly I got quite interested in looking at these things, and they were Rush's tapes from the bill. 30,000 Rush's tapes from the bill. And I think back now, if I had kept even 10 of those, eBay would be brilliant. But anyway, 30,000. So if ever the question comes up in a pub quiz is where have the original tapes gone from the bill? Bulgaria. So anyway, I ended up at this station. It was a new station. I managed to get a job as a runner there. And for a year, I was franking the mail and putting out memos and that sort of stuff, but also had a chance to mingle and meet the people and help out. And when people were sick, stand in and all that sort of stuff. And I worked on some incredibly fun things. And we did there, it was the world's first live internet broadcast, television simulcast. And this was a London cable station, and we had set up, and because of my electronics, I'd set up this thing with a computer which was taking a snapshot every 10 seconds, and the audio was streaming, and we used a web thing called CUC Me. So we were doing a live stream of the audio, and the picture was updating every 10 seconds, and so people could watch that technology as it was unfolding in '94. It was incredible. So really good fun with things like that. But because it was a news station, I was really interested in how that was all coming together, how you'd set up stories, how you would go and execute them. And Channel One was incredible because it was the first place in the UK that employed video journalists. So there's a guy called Michael Rosenblum, an American guy. He'd set up a station in America called New York One, and that was the first place, practically that use video journalists, a one-man band, pick up your camera, or woman obviously, and go and film something that you may have set up as the story. Um, and then you would do your piece to camera. You know, you'd have your camera on a tripod and film your piece to camera. You go back, or you do a live broadcast if that's what they wanted. You go back, edit it together, write it all together, and voice it, and that was your package. Now, Channel One, they were like shoving that stuff out like a sausage factory. So you would do 3 stories a day, and you know, by the evening you wouldn't remember what you'd done in the morning. But I tell you what, you could use the camera kit and edit quite quickly off the back of that. So an incredible training ground to be able to make mistakes, play with stuff I'd never seen before in my life, um, and also meet people that subsequently, now 25 years on, I still am in contact with, and have been helpful to my career over that time. So it's been great.
I quite imagine it because, like you say, you're at the forefront of it all happening there, and then you're kind of experimenting and basically setting the standard of what we have today. Like we're sat on this Zencaster, and we are able to see each other every single second. But I can imagine how much fun it was with updating every 10 seconds. Like,
Crazy, and everyone hated us. I remember other TV crews would just look down on us and think, "Who are these upstarts?" And it's exactly what's happening now. You know, you'd see kind of old duffers like me seeing people on YouTube and going, "Wow, what's that all about? That's not broadcasting." It is broadcasting. I mean, my kids don't watch television; they watch YouTube. So, you know, that mentality, it's quite hard to get out of. And even back then, when we were using high 8 cameras to start with, you know, the little small tapes and stuff. And yeah, I remember the sort of ITN crews and Sky crews and people like that would be looking at us with their giant big ass cameras and thinking, what are these upstarts doing? This is not news. This is a game for them. But it was news, and we were doing much more content than them, having much more fun, covering things in more depth for probably a hundredth of the cost to do it. Very low cost television.
with that, you also became a visiting lecturer at Middlesex.
Yeah,
How did you find that? Because you were there for 5 years, and that's a long time to be a visiting lecturer whilst
yeah.
also juggling
It
a lot of different
was
stuff.
it was fantastic. I got into it through a chap called John Curran, who I worked with when for a period of time, I worked at a production company making programs for Sky and the BBC, and John was one of the camera people that was working with us for about 3 years or so. John had he was involved in this course at Middlesex with a guy called Ruddy, and essentially it was a load of practicing people in the industry were contributing to this course. So John was a cameraman, cinematographer, that sort of thing. Roddy was involved in dramas and that sort of thing. They had somebody else that would do film. I was involved in that through the journalism aspect of it and the video journalism aspect. So I would just do 1 day a week on a Friday. So at that time, I was working night shifts where I am now. So I would go in the night before at 7 o'clock and finish at 9 o'clock in the morning, then go straight to Middlesex and do 6 hours of teaching from that. So it was quite full on, but it was an absolute joy for a couple of reasons. Because you know, my feeling, as I said before, is there's nothing like picking up the kit and playing with it and making mistakes, and that was totally my ethos from the beginning. So the students there, and probably 50% of them were international foreign students. For them, it was sort of unheard of. You know, are we allowed to pick up this kit? It's like, yes, pick it up. Go and break it. It's any kit. We'll replace it. And they really got into it, and I would set them. Um, we would spend a bit of the time doing lectures and the fundamentals of journalism, you know, the 5 Ws and all that sort of thing, and legal issues and whatnot, and things that you get into. But also we explored how I consider old traditional 80s television was quite inhibiting. And you know, when you look at news reports, even today, you would see, you know, it would be an introduction voiceover from the reporter. It would be a vox pop of something or other. Then it might be a piece to camera, and then an interview with somebody, and then a sign off at the end of it. Right, 50 seconds or a minute of a VT, and you would always see that bloody establisher shot of the people that you're that they interview. You know, here is Mrs. Miggins walking down the street, past the camera, cut to Mrs. Miggins talking about it. I thought, well, we don't have to do that. And piece to cameras, they don't need to be static. So, you know, we were doing things like they're holding up the camera, and you could walk down the street and look at the camera and do your piece to camera that way. You don't need to have a tripod all the time. You know, fundamentally, and this is something that Michael Rosenbloom taught me, the American guy, you can have 3 shot, 5 shot sequences in a news report, you know, and that could be as simple as a close up and a medium and a wide of something. So you're filming a bus, a close up, a medium, and a wide. You got those 3 shots; they're going to be fundamental for your edit. And you can sit there and you can put tilts on it, and you can do whooshes and all sorts of stuff. That ain't making the bus look more interesting. You know, fundamentally for your package, you've just got to get the basics. So that's the sort of thing that we went through with them. And by week 4, we were starting that day by having an editorial meeting in the morning at sort of 10 o'clock. And from 10 to 11, we would come up with stories. We'd assign who was going to go and cover those stories. Another team would be booking interviewees to be interviewed. The 4 teams with cameras would go out themselves. When I say teams, it was teams of 2 rather than standalone video journalists, just for safety mostly. But they would go off and they would shoot and get all the interviews and the GVs they'd get. They'd come back. One of them would sit in with an editor and they would edit these pieces together. And then we would do a half-hour news broadcast to a deadline starting at 5 o'clock in that evening. So there was something of a false pressure put in on them to be able to make decisions under pressure. And they got it. You know, they got it. We had a half-hour news broadcast with weather and live guests and all that sort of stuff, and packages, fully cut, voiced, edited packages by these students who 4 weeks earlier had never even thought about doing that sort of thing. It's incredibly empowering, and that is the sole difference between 1980s television and now, is that the kids get it, and if you give them the tools and you give them encouragement, they will get it. And I fully expect to be working for some of my students in the future, and I would be happy to do so. You know, old duffers like me can't be dictating how things happen in the future. We need to be learning as well. So if I can pass on what I know to these kids, hopefully they'll do the same to theirs, right?
Definitely. And I aspire to be working alongside somebody like yourself because you work in such a hectic environment with lots of different experience. You're HEFAT certified. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You're an award winning
That
and
is
you've,
hostile environment and emergency first aid.
well, that is something that we'll get on into because I've noticed that throughout your time at ITV, I've been following you on Twitter for quite a
You've been
while
cyber
now.
stalking me.
That sounds really creepy, to be fair, doesn't it? Um,
Are
but
you ready, Hugh?
I see your tweets, and like I say, I saw your stuff with Richard Gainsford on how you were broadcasting from Ukraine, how you were broadcasting from where was it recently? I'm trying to remember now. That is terrible.
What did we do? Ukraine, Spain, and we went to
Rwanda.
Qatar, Dubai, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely from Rwanda because I
Oh,
noticed your
Rwanda, cool.
luggage got stopped, and being able to do that from a phone.
We did. We worked it out. We did. So for people that don't know, we set out with good intentions to cover the Commonwealth heads of government meeting, right? And also because it was Rwanda, we wanted to do a bit about the migrant story, and where these people who unfortunately would be sent from the UK over to Rwanda, how they'd be looked after and where they'd be staying and that sort of stuff. That was the intention. We left Heathrow on the Sunday, and it was absolute chaos. I mean, it was luggage belts weren't working. We couldn't physically check the luggage through. We had to put them on a trolley and push them to the end of the thing, and then some old bloke would turn up with a cart and load these bags on. And we said then, I was with my colleague Nick Dixon. I said to Nick, "We're never seeing those bags again." And we had all our broadcast and sound gear in the bags. Anyway, got on the flight, which we made by about 2 minutes because of the delays in processing. I mean, we were in the queue to get checked in for 2 hours, and you couldn't do it online at all. Honestly, um, so I had 2 bags. I had the tripod, and stands and lights, and I had my bag with all the broadcast gear. So I travel quite light, to be honest. I don't take a lot of gear, so it's quite a small bag. And we got to Amsterdam from Heathrow, and then from Amsterdam we took a flight to Kigali in Rwanda. Got to Kigali, and the first thing as we got off the plane and walked into the baggage hall, there was a big sign saying, "These people will not have their bags. They're in Amsterdam," was the message. And we were like, "Oh God, what are we going to do?" And no, actually, it wasn't that bad. We laughed about it because we knew it was going to happen. And we thought, well, we're not going to tell the office because they're going to get quite upset, and we were quite tired and didn't want to face that. Right? Um, so Nick said, "Well, I've got this, and I've got that, and I've got this," and then I said, "Well, I've got this and the data, and we can make it work that way." And we've got the app on our phones to be able to broadcast in the same sort of way back to the office. And so we thought, sod it, let's just do it. Let's just go for it. So we did. So we did 14 live broadcasts over the week, and we also filmed the VTs on our phones. So when I say VTs, we filmed the interviews. We did interviews with politicians and with charity workers and that sort of thing, all on the phone with one of this exact type of lapel mic, which is about 25 quid off Amazon. And we had the kit to do it. And the only thing we didn't have, which I regret, is a decent light. We had a light, but it wasn't up to speed. So even though it's fantastic that we were able to broadcast, aesthetically, it wasn't the best for me, even though no one seemed to notice in the office that we were doing it on a phone, which was worrying.
With the mention of technology, like everything going missing, it says on your LinkedIn profile that you shoot with a Canon XF305. Would that be your kind of favorite piece of technology, or is it now with your phone because
Well,
you
it's
can do
slightly out of
everything
date
on
now,
it?
actually, that LinkedIn. I left LinkedIn some time ago, and I thought I'm not even going to log in now to change stuff because then they've got me again with their emails. So um, I currently have got 3 cameras in the arsenal. The one I use every day, and it's one I went and bought myself for me, is the Sony Z280. And it's such a lovely, beautiful piece of ENG camera, and small, and does everything. I just love that camera to bits, and I use it for so much. From arty type things and music videos to standard ENG news. It's perfect for me. And then I've got an FS7, a Sony FS7. That's more of a documentary type thing. If we wanted to shoot things graded, if we had the luxury of the time to color grade stuff, then I'd probably go for that. And then my run and gun camera, I call it my Riot Cam, is an XF 405. So it's a slightly smaller version of the 305, and that's great. It's one of those cameras that if I smashed or someone shot it, I wouldn't miss it. But my 280 is my baby, and that came with me as hand luggage on that flight to Kigali because I wasn't prepared to put it in the hold. So I had the camera, but I couldn't broadcast with it, and I couldn't edit anything on it. So that's why we stuck with the phones.
Would you say your Z280 is your favorite camera or your favorite piece of technology?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I never went that. I see people now still using those DSLRs and the stupid cameras. You buy this you buy this DSLR, and the picture quality is amazing on it, and it's fantastic, and the shallow depth of fields and all that sort of stuff that lots of broadcasters want to see. You can get the same with the 280, by the way. It's all the ancillary and accessory stuff that you have to add to it to make it a proper usable camera. You need to put it on rails so the rails can hold a proper battery, that can hold a proper sound module of some sort, so you can put XLR professional mics into it, that can hold the big lenses on the front because they're heavy and make it off balance. So suddenly you've got 4, 5, 6 different things plugged in, which all need batteries, and you need to charge those up too. For a camera that will only record to a certain format in progressive, not in broadcast interlaced. So the production editing time on that is increased. The file sizes are bigger. The turnaround is longer. And okay, it's got amazing depth of field, but what an absolute ball ache it was to get that in the first place. So I can turn up with a 280. I will turn that thing on and I'll press record, and I know every single time, and I've been using it for over a year now. Every single time, every shot I get out of that I framed, I'm going to be happy with. Um, and I can get all that depth of field stuff if people want it, but you don't really need that in news.
I'd be quite intrigued. You mentioned that you've got a camera that you wouldn't mind being shot. Has there ever been a time where you found yourself in a circumstance where you didn't expect to be in, like, say, your time in Ukraine?
Oh yeah, definitely, and actually not this recent time in Ukraine. We were there for 6 weeks this year, and that was horrific and horrendous. But the moment that made me think about my own longevity was in Ukraine in 2014. I think it was. It was the Maidan protests there in Independence Square, and it was, if you remember back then, it was a popular sort of a popular uprising against the government because of the government was trying to, I'm trying to think what it was now. They were trying to move away from Europe and move closer to Russia, and the Ukrainians don't want that, as you can see this year. They want nothing to do with Russia. So they protested. They built up barricades in Independence Square, which is a huge square, like Trafalgar Square or something like that, but 3 times bigger. And we were on a high point at the end of Independence Square, looking down, so we could see all the crowds there. And there were sort of fireworks and things going off, and you could see loads of police, and behind us were riot police and that sort of thing. And excuse me, we thought, okay, it's okay. Everything looks fine. We're not seeing anything that's not controls, and everyone seems to be behaving themselves. A bit rowdy. There's a few fires and things going on, but it's okay. So we stayed there, and we were doing a broadcast. We did a broadcast at 6 o'clock, and it was all right. And then we could start hearing gunshots at a distance, and we thought, okay, well, that might just be blanks, or it might be something like that. And then out of nowhere, this was just before the 7 o'clock broadcast, just behind the reporter that was with Jonathan Swain, saw a kind of muzzle of an AK-47 coming up behind him. It was up the spiral staircase from the bottom up to the top. And this chap was carrying an AK and went past Jonathan, and then another two came out with AKs and that sort of thing. And then within a matter of seconds, the security forces were starting to shoot at those people. And they were literally, 30 foot away from us. So there was a hail of gunfire going on, and we were like, Christ, this has gone pear-shaped really quickly. So we grabbed our stuff, and, well, when I say grabbed, we left quite a bit of stuff, but we grabbed the essential stuff and legged it to the hotel, which was probably about 100 meters behind us. And gunfire was raining. I mean, it was deafening, and you could hear the ricochets of bullets everywhere. And then there was a chap, a riot police guy, and he was shot in the chest, probably 10 foot away from us, and he just collapsed onto his knees and landed on his face. And I thought, this is, as you would say, shit got real. And we, there were bullets ricocheting by our feet as we were running towards the hotel. Bullets were running into the glass of the hotel. It was raining down on top of us. We got into the hotel, and we carried on broadcasting over the phone. We managed to get a phone signal, so there was no chance of video. So we finished live broadcast for about half an hour or so inside this hotel. We were keeping low under the windows and didn't know what was going on. It sounded like a football match of people screaming and gunfire going off. And what happened is that the people in the square had surged towards the riot police and tried to push them back out of the square. So they had done that, probably, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 people, I have no idea the figure, had surged, pushed the police. Some of the police were snipers, and they were shooting at the crowds. And they got pushed back probably about a kilometre behind the hotel, away from the square. And as we went down back into the hotel lobby, it had been turned into a morgue. So there were probably 10, 12 bodies lying on the floor there, and the hotel had been turned into a kind of triage centre. And they'd all been shot in the chest, in the heart, or in the head, so sniper shots. And you just kind of, you know, I think back now, I was quite affected by that incident. Incidentally, you know, when I got back, I was in a not in a PTSD sort of way, but kind of quite mindful that things can go wrong quite quickly. Um, and I kind of realised that were very lucky. I mean, we were quite naive, thinking that it wouldn't change quite quickly. Um, and it was a good life lesson in that respect, because everything we've done since has been done differently. And you learn by your mistakes, obviously. So that was quite hairy. And it was so weird going back to exactly the same place 2 years later for the Euro football tournament, which had been held there. And it was absolutely fine. I mean, it had been rebuilt, and there was no sign there was any problem at all. And then I went back there for the Eurovision Song Contest, I think it was. Yes, it was exactly the same place. And then again recently to exactly the same place during the troubles there. And it was so, you know, I've seen that Independence Square sort of beautiful and smashed up, and then beautiful again, and almost, well, it's not smashed up, but it's, you know, got bombs thrown at it. So it's yeah, it's an incredible experience for me. I'm so glad I did it, but I'm definitely more wary now than I was back
It'll definitely not be something you ever forget.
then.
But would you say that's been your most stressful time, or has it been stressful for you when you've been editing something and you've had more of a deadline to work towards, or is it just a time like that?
Do you know, the one thing now, having done this for so long, that doesn't stress me out is filming or editing to a deadline. I know it will happen, um, because um, because it just will. You know, you make sure that it happens. It's not something that you can ever be seen to bottleneck before a delivery of something. You know, if you think it's not going to work, you make alternative plans, or if an interviewee drops out, maybe you find another, or you leave them out. Or so there's never that sort of stress. I never get stressed in the production process. Live television doesn't stress me at all. Live camera work doesn't either. What stresses me out probably is the technology sometimes not working, um, because it's out of my control. I mean, I was always told you worry about the things you can control, not the things you can't, and um, but that's still quite frustrating. So, in terms of the most stressful thing, probably working in the field in hostile environments, definitely. But I never get stressed about the production aspect.
There's a lot of productions going on at lots of different times. And do you find yourself watching certain productions? Like, do you watch shows that other people create, or do you just watch television as a whole, or because you work in it, do you try to get away from it?
No, no, I watch other things, and I'm always inspired by what I see. I mean, I will never, I promise you, I'll never criticize someone else's work, um, or their ideas, because they're doing it and they're trying it out, and I've definitely picked up a whole load of things that I've stolen and used myself, and claimed to be my own idea. So yeah, I get inspired by seeing other things. I mean, you see things in films, but they can't be replicated easily because there's a huge budget and it's probably all special effects anyway. But I really like. I mean, I saw something last week actually, which it blew my mind, and I thought I'm going to build the rig to enable me to do that. And it was essentially like a GoPro, but it was, you know, you see those classic shots of GoPros in fighter jets behind the pilot's head, and so I was expecting. I don't even know how I saw it. It was on YouTube or something like that. But so the plane was doing all that sort of thing and then doing loops and that, whatnot. Um, so you've seen that shot. You've seen the GoPro kind of following that. Now this one stayed absolutely stable. So as the plane was doing loops, the camera stayed completely stable, and that blew my mind. I thought the possibilities of filming with something like that.
Hmm.
I don't know where I'd use it, but I definitely want to be able to use it somewhere. So yeah, I see cool things like that and feel very envious. But then I think I'm going to do that.
That actually sounds really cool. It immediately made me think, is it like an anchored 360 cam that they've managed to keep a shot focused on?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
It,
know.
it could be 360 and all done in edit. It could be. It could be. Do you know? I don't know what it could be, but I'm gonna build it.
I'd love to see the outcome of that because I'm nerdy. Technology is great. But with your 21 years at ITV, which I bet has absolutely flown by, Do you
Yeah.
find that there's people surrounding you that you look up to, or is there people outside of ITV that you look up to?
Look up to professionally, or
Just as a role model. So yeah, I guess professionally.
um, yeah, I guess so. I mean, the people I work with quite closely are the correspondents, and I do look up to all of them. Yeah, for sure. They teach me something new every day, and yeah, I respect them obviously, and they respect me. So that's good. You've got to have that healthy working relationship. So they're not necessarily role models for me, but they're good mentors and teachers, and people outside of where I am. Um, who do I look up to? I don't know. I mean, do you know, I've got two young daughters, and I'm so busy with them that there's no time to look up to other people. There really isn't. I've got to muddle through it and get through it myself.
Okay, I want to know now because, like you say, it's a hectic environment. It's live television. It can go wrong at any moment. So, if I had to ask you, what do you believe people underestimate the most, whether it be with your job or your environment that you work in? What do you think it would be?
Hmm. I think I think people assume that to do a live broadcast means turning up somewhere and turning on a camera and pressing a button. And while that may be true if everything goes well, that's not necessarily the case. And the thing that completely wrecks any kind of broadcast, such as television or YouTube or whatever it is, even when you see YouTube videos, for a visual medium is audio. And if the audio's rubbish, then you've completely lost the people watching it because it looks amateur, it sounds terrible, and yeah, it's not going to work. So if you go somewhere, you've got to make sure the audio is good, and then the lighting has to be great. You know yourself, and then if you make videos at home and that sort of thing, you've got to have half decent lights. Now I've sort of pilfered my wife's light over here because she's over there, but she has a ring light up there, which is daylight and whatnot, which is bouncing off the wall behind me, and lighting's important, and I'm a light fanatic. The back of my car, I've got probably 10 grand's worth of lights, which I use different ones for different scenarios, whether you're outside, you're inside, or I just think it's if you're gonna do proper television, then you should really do proper television and not skimp on it. So lights and audio, and then with all of those things, you need to have them on stands, and they need to be safe so people don't run over them and walk into them. So you can't just rock up somewhere and do terrestrial broadcasting. You need to have the kit. You need to keep it safe. Um, it needs to not be breaking any laws of where you are. It's private land or it's public land, that sort of stuff. And it needs to be perfect every single time. So anybody can whip up a camera and take a video on their phone, but can you do that consistently and sound good and look good every single time? That's what the challenge is.
I don't. Yeah, I can completely agree with that because when we did a kind of fake TV show at university, we had three different VT crews, but none of the VTs looked exactly the same. None of them
Hmm.
were shot the same way, and none of them were even any way similar. I guess because there was lots of different variables that could be changed at any
Mm,
time. Some were shot during the day, some were shot during the night.
mm.
But what would you say currently motivates you to be your best? Is it your daughters or is it the people surrounding you to keep you going?
Um, it's definitely my family. My wife, she's incredibly clever, and she's got a doctorate, so I have to call her Doctor Kell. And and she's got this amazing office which she does all her work in, and so she inspires me a lot. My daughters are very feisty, and they inspire me too and keep me busy. Um, what so I guess my life now is a mixture of the professional and the home life, and that people talk about the work home balance, and it really is fundamental. And I get
Hmm.
to a point on the motorways near my house. As I'm driving past those, my work head switches off and my home head switches on, and it's almost like a load lifted, or just a different mood. It's a mood change. So um, I love where I live. It's green. You can see the stars. There's no light pollution. it's a small village and everybody knows everybody, and the kids can walk to school, and there's one shop and two pubs and three churches, I think it is. So that's quite nice, and it's something that we've worked really hard to get. You know, we moved out of the big stink in London to get here. So what inspires me is I love my job. I really do. I get out of bed and I feel enthusiastic. And when I say I get out of bed, I get out of bed at 3 in the morning. So that to do that consistently for 20 odd years is, it must mean I like it. So that's good. And yeah, my family are great. So I love my work. I love my family, and it all works out fine.
It sounds as if you've got a great life going. But if we were to wrap this whole podcast up and basically ask you for a bit of advice, whether it be a media professional that's just starting out, whether it be someone you've just met in a lift or somebody you've met on the street, what bit of advice would you give them to help them along in life?
There are loads of bits of advice that you can give for getting into the industry and staying in the industry. But I think if you've got passion for it, that helps. Years ago, I'd say don't do a media course and do something else. I think that's changed now. I think media courses are quite progressive, and they're quite practical, and they probably do help out. I think if you're to be in this industry, you've got to be able to listen to people and compromise and work with people that you may not choose to work with, but you adapt to do that because it's the professional thing to do. So that's great. You need to do that, obviously. But I think everyone that you meet, everyone that you talk to, everyone that you come across while doing it, try and keep respectful, get their contact details, because you never know when you might need to call upon them again to help you out. So have a big contacts book of people that you've met. My contacts book goes back to 1994, and I'm still able to. Those numbers still work. You need to add the first bit 020 as opposed to 0171, but they do work, and people take my calls, which is great. I feel I am respectful, and I think that's helped me out. I think I'm not impatient, and that's helped me out. And I think if you want to do well, you should listen to people, be prepared to compromise, but keep an amazing contacts book of people that you come across, and don't be afraid to call them up.